oh, maybe I should put instructions on how to use the bathroom in the bathroom. I mean, stuff like that, which if you do, yay, good. You do you. That's good. But I need to be I need to let go a little more than that.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of 8's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Greetings, compadres, for your mystery meat sandwich today. Before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. And that, my friends, is a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. So when I was getting sober, I was flying to Orange County to see my temporary sponsor, and I would do step work. And this was still super early days of my sobriety and my recovery. And what I did was I would go down and do a step or two with my temporary sponsor. And airplanes had always been a super huge trigger for me. I would drink on planes all the time. And so I get on this plane. Keep in mind, I'm super early days of sobriety. And I'm alone. And I realized that basically nobody would know if I drank. And nobody knew that I was on probation, totally by myself, right? Just like anonymous Jane Doe airplane flyer. And nobody knew that basically I should be quitting. I shouldn't be drinking at all. But I realized that I would know. And that was going to be enough for me to turn 50 shades of miserable again. And for me, that wasn't an option. So I didn't drink, because I didn't want to live with the consequences of that choice, if only in my mind. So that's when I knew I was actually starting to, turn a corner, make some progress. And that was a watershed moment for me. That was when I realized I was starting to value my relationship with myself above the momentary sense of ease and comfort that I'd feel by taking a drink. So that's what's in my brain today.
And now, onto the Chaplain's Chat.
The Chaplain's Chat today is an opportunity to learn about ourselves through a little buzzword called the Enneagram. Now, in certain circles over the past, I don't know, I want to say like 5 years, probably more. My relationship with time is very spotty. I have no idea, 5 or so years. This ancient, I'm going to call it a personality test, just for the sake of this, but we'll go with that explanation just for the moment. But it has resurfaced in many circles that are into philosophy, lots of different churches that are a little bit more, maybe one would call it on the edge, or just basically some organizations that are willing to look at personalities and not get too hung up on some of those details. Some spiritual circles have brought it back out, dug it out from the archives, not that it ever went anywhere, but it can create a little tiny bit of controversy in some circles. And so I just want to say, I guess, first off, that I'm not channeling spirits. This is not going to be a seance, not evil. In fact, like if you've ever done the Myers-Briggs, or if you've ever read what color is your parachute? I think there's actually another one that's got animals. It was like an otter, a lion, a golden retriever, and something else. But it's really just a tool that creates more self-awareness. And so the Enneagram is in that similar vein as those types of books and tools. And so this, let me just preface, is going to be a very high level introduction to the Enneagram, even though it's going to be broken down into multiple parts. There will be more than just this podcast today about it. I'm going to break it into sections, and you can really go bananas basically with the Enneagram, but I'm not here for that. This is going to be more like your Applebee's sampler platter, right? So it's just little bite-size parts of the Enneagram. So basically, I'm asking you to just let it wash over you. So that brings us to the origins. If you know much about me, you know I'm not like a fan of launching into like some deep historical read off of Wikipedia big thing. So this is my understanding, okay? And I'll start by saying, like, ever since the printing press became a thing, I mean, that sort of in my mind was kind of the game changer, because prior to that, all these stories were passed down orally, whether it was from tribes sitting around a campfire or however people shared their stories with other generations. Until the printing press came into play, it was like, hey, let me tell you something. Let me tell you a story. And so growing up in the church, for me, I believed and was taught to believe that the Bible should be taken literally and not figuratively. And my willingness to look at things like the Enneagram, I mean, that was kind of not a thing in the church where I grew up. That would not be an acceptable thing. And so I had to surrender to being willing to set aside everything I thought I knew in order for God to show me new things. And that only came with sobriety. That only came later. Primarily, it was the teachings of Father Richard Rohr, who I began reading in early sobriety, who got me to start thinking about things from a different lens. Because the truth was, I wasn't there during biblical times. Personally, I was not there. So I didn't know what was actually true. And so I just basically ask you to, again, just let this be an experience. Take what you like from it, leave the rest, and you are more than welcome to go online and explore the Enneagram in depth. You can really go down multiple pathways with it. So from my understanding, there is a bunch of mystery around the original origins, and it's generally accepted that in times of antiquity, there were these dudes and they were like the desert elders of the church. Okay. So like your saints, your token like town mystics and theologians, and they lived during the first 5 centuries of the Common Era. I have no idea what that is. The Common Era? Common to what? Common denominator? Common, I don't know. I have to look into that. But most of them were from Greece, from my understanding, near the east, near Egypt, where all those dudes were back in the day. And so they were also familiar with the Greek philosophies. I mean, Greece is also where they produce so much cool stuff, right? I mean, I think the Olympics are from Greece. I'm kind of just guessing. That's what I think. But them, them and also the Romans, I just feel like they had a lot of stuff. They had a lot of stuff that they did and passed on, and they were just busy dudes. So basically, Greek philosophy, as far as I understand it, turned from a real study, like study, to more questions over time, over the spectrum of time, to inner questions of meaning and value. So in their thinking, the desert elders relied heavily on Plato and philosophy. So Plato, he taught, from my understanding, that this material world was a reflection of a spiritual world, which I love because I love a good metaphor. I'm all in. And for these men, Christian faith had little to do with actual doctrines. So telling people what to think or what to believe or what the Bible said, especially with institutional and organized religion, as it often is today. So the desert elders were interested in experiencing God and in how people experience the spiritual world inside of themselves. And so, sidebar, I did a Bible study in the late 90s, no, mid 90s, and it was called Experiencing God. I think it was Henry, either Blackwell, Blackburn. It was somebody with that name, and I loved it. It was actually pretty revolutionary for me because there was a phrase that they said in that Bible study, which was something to the effect of watch and see what God is doing and join him. And I just loved that. I thought that was just a sweet and kind way to say, hey, come and, have an encounter with God. And that was it. And that's what I liked so much about it. So anyways, okay, so back to these dudes, these desert elders. They were looking at patterns, essentially, that keep human beings locked in themselves in inner turmoil. And, humans are super complex individuals, right? We're not simple. And in listing these patterns, they named 8 of the 9 passions of the Enneagram. And, they added things, they found out more things along the way. So then, later on, you kind of get these additional, let's call them side dishes, like wings. If you've heard of, I'm in Enneagram type 2 with a whatever wing, that's what I'm talking about. And so one of the practices that they did translated into awakening the mind and the heart. So basically looking at the emotions, that emotions left to their own devices become passions. So just kind of what lights your fire? Where do you have a gut reaction coming from? What is your deepest, darkest fear that possibly you don't even recognize as a fear? And I know for me, when I got started in the 12-step program, I thought, well, fear, I don't have any fears. Like I thought fears were like, oh, I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of snakes. It didn't dawn on me that possibly the way I was interacting with other humans was out of fear or came from a place of fear. It didn't dawn on me until I started doing the steps. And then I really looked at my motives in the 4th step, and I really got to see a pattern of, oh, hey, I got to watch out for manipulation. And, that may seem like embarrassing to say or admit, but it's not for me because I feel like it's super empowering to know more about why I operate the way I operate and the lens from which I see things. Now, one more thing I just want to reiterate before we do this. I'm going to have you do a little quiz, but I can almost sense the stress of my fellow evangelicals when they hear the topic of this podcast. So I just want to address it and say that your girl here grew up Baptist and we were not allowed to dance or drink. And so do you think that maybe we would have done the Enneagram quiz at youth group on Sunday nights? Hell no. No horoscopes, no fortune tellers, no having your palm read at grad night, no Ouija boards at birthday parties. I mean, I even knew some Pentecostals who couldn't go to the movies. So there's no way on God's green earth we'd get the stamp of approval for a personality test. Clutch your pearls. No, ma'am. So instead of getting wrapped around the axle, if you're in the Christian church, I just ask you again, let's just play pretend. Let's pretend that we haven't been indoctrinated in judging, discerning, which is a much more acceptable church term, but to basically pretend that we're mystics of yesteryear. And let's just do what is called Rule 62 in the 12-step community. And that is, sidebar, I know I keep kind of getting distracted, but I love this, which is that's when the 12-step communities decided they'd have to set up a bunch of rules about 12-step fellowship. And so they made a ton of rules for alcoholics and addicts. Nobody followed them. Big surprise. And so then they made Rule 62, which was don't take yourself too damn seriously. And I love that. Like, I love that whole idea because it's true. Like, I can get hyper focused on stuff and, just have my ADHD, like, figure out every single last, like, oh, maybe I should put instructions on how to use the bathroom in the bathroom. I mean, stuff like that, which if you do, yay, good. You do you. That's good. But I need to be I need to let go a little more than that. All right. So back to the Enneagram. Let's just be open-minded. We're not going to get too transfixed on the letter of the law. Let's chill and just ask for eyes to see the message or the spirit of the Enneagram. The whole point is to become a better contributing member of society, right? Which is not against Christianity. So let's not get our Jordache genes in a bunch and we're just going to jump in. So it's a complex system and it's not going to hurt you. So we're going to get started. So here's what you're going to need. Sidebar, I love office supplies. So if you're like me and you have this weird, crazy, unnatural obsession with office supplies, then you're going to have no trouble. For others of you, you might need to pause the tape. I mean, just kidding. Those of you who are my age know that VCRs used to be a thing. You used to have to pause the tape to go get stuff. Anyway, here we go. So this is going to be a 3-part quiz. It is not accurate. You can go online. You can pay. Well, it is accurate. I don't know why I said it wasn't. It's accurate, but I mean, surprisingly accurate for what this is. You can go online, pay a bunch of money, and probably confirm your type if you'd like. And you're welcome to do that. But this is going to be real simple. So you're going to need a piece of paper, a black pen, a blue pen, a red pen, and everybody's favorite, at least I hope it's your favorite because it's mine, a yellow highlighter. Follow me on this. Hopefully I explain it easily. You're going to make 3 rows. Each row will be right on top of the next one. So basically, you're going to write this out in landscape. That's probably the best way to do it. So it'll be 3 rows, and each of the rows will be numbered 1 through 9, left to right. So basically, the first row, so we're horizontal, the first row is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The second row underneath that, same thing. And then the third one. Now, before you start, if you didn't yet already start, the first row will be written with the blue pen. And then leave a tiny little bit of space so you can make a label. And then the second row will be written in black pen. And the third row will be in red pen. So it should be your first row, blue pen, numbers 1 through 9. Second row, black pen, numbers 1 through 9. Third row, red pen, numbers 1 through 9. So take your highlighter because now you're done with the pens, unless you like a label. And then I'm going to tell you what you can label them. I mean, I get that. I'm big on labels too. So the label for that first line, the blue pen, is core desires and fears. Now, the black pen, second row, is going to be, here's the label, stance / I love a good slash, stance / social style. And that's going to be, you want to label it a triad. I'm just giving you a heads up, it's going to be a triad. Okay. So finally, take the red pen and next to your red row, which should be the third of 3 rows of numbers, and you're going to write centers of intelligence. And again, it's a triad. All right. So here's the thing. Like, don't overanalyze this. I'm like that person typically who's like, well, I'm kind of this and I'm kind of that. And so I don't know what to put. And I'll just totally overanalyze it. So this will be one of those things you just want to go with what you naturally resonate with the most the first time. So you don't want to overthink it. So just kind of stand back, take a deep breath, don't overthink it, like loosen up, like maybe jump on the little trampoline like Tony Robbins, just Tony Robbins it up, and then you're going to just get a gut reaction, and that's what you're going to go with. All right. So at the end of the day, and you're really unsettled and you can't decide between 2, like no one's going to know. So it's okay. So you can put 2 and then just kind of, Columbo it out later and like try and figure out which seems more like you. All right. So first is that core desires and fears. Again, I'm going to throw a sidebar in there, which in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, which is the book that came after Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're in 12-step fellowships, and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions literature contains a concept called the instincts. And these are just basic human instincts that every human being needs or thinks about or unconsciously deals with. And they are the desire, these are the instincts, okay, from the 12 and 12, the desire for social and emotional security, financial security, and sex relations. So try setting those basic needs aside. Like if one of those sticks out in your mind is like, that's the most important thing to me. Just kind of set those ones aside because those are like assumed, if that makes sense. All right. So we're going to get at what is really driving us. And if you want to listen first and then go back and highlight your answers, that's fine. You can totally do that. And that's what the highlighter is for. You're going to go the first row. You're going to highlight the number 1 or the number 2 or the number 7. You're just going to highlight your answer. Okay. Here we go. Blue pen row. Desires, core desires, and fears. Highlight the number 1 if your core desire is to be good and to have integrity. On the other end of the spectrum, your core fear, let's say, would be rejection, doing something incorrectly, doing something wrong, or something corrupt or evil or basic unsavoriness. All right. Highlight number 2 if your core desire is to be loved and needed, and your core fear is being unloved and unneeded and forgotten. Okay, so highlight the number 3 if your core desire is to be valued, consulted, and successful, and your core fear would be being worthless, bringing nothing to the table, being disregarded, disvalued. Okay. Highlight the number 4 if your core desire is to be understood, and your core fear is having no identity and no significance. Okay, highlight the number 5 if your core desire is to be capable and competent, or if your core fear is to be helpless, incompetent, or basically incapable in a given situation. Okay, highlight number 6 if your core desire is to have support, have guidance, wisdom, or if your core fear is being without support and with nobody to consult, to bounce things off of, to gain wisdom from, or get advice from. Highlight number 7. If your core desire is to be satisfied, fulfilled, satiated, filled with purpose, and your core fear is being trapped, being in pain, being deprived, or having a lack of options, having to go without something you consider to be a need and not a want. I wonder what mine is because I seem to know the most about that one. Okay. Highlight number 8. If your core desire is to protect yourself and those you love, and your core fear is being controlled, harmed, or violated. Highlight number 9. If your core desire is to have peace of mind, serenity, and wholeness, and your core fear is loss, separation, or disunity, or not feeling whole. All right, next row. So you can write stances, or if you didn't already, the social stances. I'm going to explain these 3, and then I'll have you just listen, and then I'll tell you which numbers to highlight based on which stance you chose. So just listen to them first, and then keep in your mind the thing, like the stance that you think resonates. And this is the part that people might generally get a little bit hung up on. So just, again, don't overthink it. Okay. Stance number 1. So this is the stance where you would highlight numbers, specific numbers, if you like to build things, plan things, dream about things to come. Maybe you feel like everybody else is moving a little bit too slowly and they're not executing at the rate that you would prefer that they execute. Okay. Stance number 2, that one is most closely identified with wanting to do things well, fearing that you're not doing things as expected by others, fearing that you're inadequate, that maybe others aren't pleased with your progress or your process, and your highly intuitive connection to people. So if you take their feedback personally, I don't know anything about that. In fact, you use their feedback as a measuring stick to know how you're doing in the world. So you actually put worth and value on others' feedback. So you're in the moment and you look to see what's needed now. And the last stance, stance 3, if you like to ponder, reflect, you feel detached to the present and the future. You look to see how things went in the past to determine how you'll make your decision today. Okay, so back to stance number 1. This one is focused on the future, right? Okay, so planning, dreaming, building, feeling like everybody else moves too slow. If that's the stance that you resonate with, highlight numbers 3, 7, and 8. Stance number 2 is focused on the present. Okay, so fearing that you're not doing things well, taking feedback personally. And if that's you, highlight numbers 1, 2, and 6. Okay, stance number 3 is focused on the past. And this is the one where you like to look to the past, ponder, reflect, see how things went in order to make decisions. And if that's you, highlight numbers 4, 5, and 9. Okay, So did you get that? Stance number 1 is highlight 3, 7, and 8. Stance number 2, 1, 2, and 6. Stance number 3, highlight 4, 5, and 9. Okay, last row. This is the red pen row. This is the centers of intelligence triads. Such a good word. Okay, so basically what I want you to kind of think about is, what is the nature of how you initially respond? Like, say, for example, to unexpected news. From which place does your reaction come from? Okay, so what's your first response? So the first one is a heart triad. So feeling like possibly you're to blame, wondering if you're at fault, wondering if you could have done something differently, if it would have made a difference. Going through basically the woulda, coulda, shouldas. Oh, and again, sorry, what I'll do is I'll tell you the numbers to highlight after I explain these ones. Number 2, the head triad, which is an intellectual response, trying to figure out what happens next. What do I do? What are the steps? Almost robotic. Self-reliance. I got to, make a plan. I got to execute a plan. What are all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted? The third is the gut triad. This one is jumping straight into anger, almost instinctively just jumping into a hot, fiery, stinging, like defensiveness. So just wanting to take action over something, wanting to blame somebody, wanting someone to pay, wanting to know who's responsible for this. And so those are the 3. Heart triad, feeling like maybe you're to blame, wondering what you could have done. Second one, the head triad, figuring out what happens next, making a plan. And the third, the gut triad, which is springing into anger. Okay, so generally, if you have that first response, that heart kind of response, you're going to highlight numbers 2, 3, and 4. So you're highlighting 3 numbers just like you were in the row above. If you generally have a head response, the intellectual response, the second one, you're going to highlight numbers 5, 6, and 7. And if you generally have a gut knee-jerk response, angry, defensive, the gut triad, you're going to highlight numbers 8, 9, and 1. So you're highlighting multiple numbers like you did before in that row above when we were talking about the stances. Okay, so one more time, the heart, highlight 2, 3, and 4. The head, highlight 5, 6, and 7. And the gut, highlight 8, 9, and 1. All right, wrapping it up here. So you can go all the way down the rabbit hole with these. But again, these are just basics. What you should see at this point when you look at the paper is there should be at least one number that stands out that you highlighted more than the others more often. And that, in theory, would be a starting place for your type. So let's say you have a bunch of 5s, okay? So you would start off by going, well, maybe I'm a 5, right? And so that's the goal of this little quiz. That would maybe save you if you didn't want to do, 400 questions trying to figure it out. That's the goal. So I'm not saying like, oh, for sure this is your type or whatever, but it is a starting place. And I found for me, and I've done this with my kids, seems kind of accurate from my perspective.
Finally, here's your bailout bag.
Okay, so for the bailout bag, take what you like and leave the rest. It's been said that we are spiritual beings and we're having a human experience. And I just personally think the more that I learn about myself, the better human I am to other people, because then I can take responsibility for my actions. Then I can see my part in a situation. If I'm in a conflict or a disagreement with somebody, I can see more accurately the MO that's inside of me. And that helps me to make different choices, right? In how I behave and how my actions come out. So I feel that, our challenges, our character defects, all of that are actually positives, because they're the fuel that helps us to understand that we do have power over working over those, on working on them and getting outside help if you need outside help, or at least a general awareness. So I think of it as an empowering tool for sure. All right. Remember, we will be doing more of this. We're going to unpack some of the types, and you're going to hear some of those buzzwords that I told you about at the beginning, like the wings, and all of that will be to come. It's kind of interesting. But again, jump on Google and Google your type that, stuck out to you from your highlighted numbers, and see if you think it rings true. That'll be your little sneak peek teaser for the next episode. All right. Remember to be kind, rewind, and thank you for the honor of your time.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.